On the morning of October 4th, 1907, a work crew on the rim of a man-made canyon in central Panama watched a thin crack open in the reddish clay beneath their boots. The air was heavy, the trench below loud with steam shovels and loaded railway cars. The science that could predict how a slope holds or fails did not yet exist, so the men read the ground the only way anyone could, by watching it move. Over the next 10 days, that hillside slide, 14 feet a day, 500,000 cubic yards of wet clay poured into the deepest trench human beings had ever cut across the neck of a continent. It buried the shovels and the track, and it was one slide out of more than 100. This was the Culebra Cut, and it was only one of the problems.
This is the hidden story of how the Panama Canal almost died before it could change the world. The story starts with ambition that had already succeeded once. Ferdinand de Lesseps, the French engineer behind the Suez Canal. He saw Panama as his next conquest. In 1881, his company began work. A sea-level canal, a straight cut from ocean to ocean. Workers flooded in, engineers, diggers, people from Europe, the Caribbean, and beyond. They attacked the jungle with sheer determination. But almost immediately, death stalked the camps. Men woke with high fevers, skin turned jaundiced, a sickly yellow. Internal bleeding led to black vomit. This was yellow fever. Others suffered malaria's brutal cycle: chills, sweats, exhaustion. Hospitals at Ancon filled rapidly. Death rates were horrifying. Many wards lost 3/4 of their patients. The French engineers were baffled. They blamed bad air or decaying vegetation, the old miasma theory. They didn't connect it to the swarms of mosquitoes, breeding in standing water everywhere, construction pits, household containers. Without knowing the true enemy, their efforts were futile. The project dragged on for 8 years. Over 22,000 workers perished, a loss large enough to empty several mid-sized towns. The company went bankrupt in 1889. Only about 11 miles of canal had been dug. The dream lay in ruins, largely because of a foe, too small to see as the threat it was. 15 years later, the United States stepped in. In 1904, under President Theodore Roosevelt, America acquired the rights and the French equipment. The goal was clear: build the canal, Project American Power and Commerce. But the same deadly conditions awaited. Colonel William C. Gorgas, a U.S. Army surgeon, took charge as chief sanitary officer. He had already wiped out yellow fever in Havana after the Spanish-American War. Gorgas brought crucial knowledge. Cuban doctor Carlos Finlay had long proposed, mosquitoes transmit yellow fever. Walter Reed's U.S. Army Commission confirmed it in 1900 with careful experiments. The Aedes aegypti mosquito carries the virus. It breeds in small amounts of clean water around human dwellings. A forgotten barrel, a plant saucer. Like a flying hypodermic needle, it picks up the virus from one person and delivers it to the next. Malaria came from Anopheles mosquitoes, breeding in larger natural wetlands. Gorgas wanted to target these carriers directly. Initial support was lukewarm. Some officials preferred traditional cleaning methods. They questioned the cost. Then came the crisis of 1905. Yellow fever hit the American workforce. Cases rose rapidly. Skilled men began leaving, in droves. The project teetered, on the edge of abandonment, echoing the French disaster. But here is where the story takes its pivotal turn. New chief engineer John Stevens, a railroad expert, recognized sanitation as the real priority. He gave Gorgas full backing. He helped convince Roosevelt to provide complete support and funding. The war on mosquitoes was on. Gorgas mobilized thousands of men into sanitation brigades. They divided the entire canal zone into districts. Inspectors scoured every house, every camp, every puddle. Swamps were drained with miles of ditches. Brush was cleared back. Oil was spread on inescapable water, 700,000 gallons of it, creating a thin film that stopped larvae from breathing at the surface. It was like sealing off their lifeline, forever. Homes and barracks got tight window screens, door screens, turning living quarters into fortresses. Beds had mosquito nets. Piped water systems replaced open barrels. Perfect nurseries no more. Sick patients were isolated in specially screened fever cages. Mosquitoes could not bite them and spread the disease further. Buildings were fumigated with sulfur or pyrethrum smoke to kill adult insects. The effort was relentless. Daily, microscopic engineering applied to the tiniest details of the environment. Most people stop the story here and think the battle was won by medicine alone. But here's the part nobody wants to admit. This was engineering, as much as medicine. Gorgas treated the entire isthmus like one giant machine. Its hidden weak point, the mosquito breeding cycle. Break that cycle, and the whole project could run. The results came faster than anyone expected. By the close of 1906, yellow fever was eradicated from the canal zone. Only one case reported that year, none after. Malaria cases dropped sharply, too. A stable, healthy workforce swelled to more than 40,000 at its peak. Now the real construction could surge forward, without constant loss of manpower. Engineers blasted and hauled away millions of cubic yards at the Culebra Cut. They built the enormous Gatun Dam to create a vast artificial lake. They poured concrete for massive locks that would lift ships 85 feet. That's the height of an 8-story building, using gravity and water alone. Dredges cleared the channels. By 1913, the waterway was essentially finished.
The builders had to carry a shipping route 50 miles across a jungle isthmus, while the Chagres River rose and fell dozens of feet without warning, while yellow fever and malaria killed men faster than ships could replace them, and while the shadow of the French lay over everything. A company that had already tried this crossing and buried 22,000 men without finishing it, and the route would have to hold a column of water 85 feet deep against the sea without a single pump in it. Here's the thing most people have backward. The Panama Canal is not a ditch dug down to the level of the sea. Ships do not sail through Panama. They are lifted 85 feet straight up, floated across a lake that did not exist until men made it, and lowered down the far side. The canal does not pass through the isthmus. It climbs over it. This is the story of how a generation of engineers stopped trying to dig Panama down to the ocean and chose instead to raise the ocean up to Panama. It is the story of a river that defeated every plane until it became the plan. It is the story of the men who did the lifting, most from islands hundreds of miles away, most missing from the record that should hold their names. To see why they built upward, first see why going straight through failed. The obvious canal was a sea-level canal, a trench cut so deep the two oceans simply met and flowed. Its champion was Ferdinand de Lesseps, the Frenchman who had already driven a sea-level canal through the desert at Suez, and it promised simplicity, one water level, no lifting. It died on the Chagres. Suez ran through flat sand, but Panama had a live river that could rise 10 feet in a storm. Let it flood a sea-level trench, and the cut fills with water. Fill with water, and it fills with mud, and one storm buries a month of digging. The second idea was to outdig the mountain with labor and machines. The French had tried exactly that, and the mountain was not what stopped them. The mosquito was. Before anyone understood that one insect carries yellow fever and another malaria, there was no defense but quinine and luck, and the workforce died in numbers that emptied the payroll every few months. The third idea kept the sea level plan, but proposed cutting the divide all the way down to the ocean. The volume defeated it. Every foot they dug made the walls above steeper, and the steeper the walls, the more they slid. The way out was not to fight the mountain or the river at all. The answer was to dam the thing that had ruined every other plan. Instead of fighting the Chagres, they blocked it, damming the valley at Gatun and letting the river flood into an artificial lake, the largest human beings had ever made. That lake sat 85 feet above the sea, and it became the middle of the canal. The river that made a sea-level canal impossible was the same river that filled the lake and filled the locks every time a ship passed. The enemy became the engine. It took a bankrupt French company a $40 million American purchase of the abandoned works in 1904 and years of argument to reach it. Start at the largest scale. A ship from the Atlantic is raised in 3 steps at Gatun, crosses 21 miles of Gatun Lake, threads the Culebra Cut through the divide, then drops 1 step at Pedro Miguel and 2 at Miraflores to the Pacific. go down into the cut. The bottleneck was never the digging, it was hauling the spoil away, and the American chief engineer John Stevens saw that first, nearly halting excavation to rebuild the railroad. At the peak, 6,000 men worked the cut, steam shovels from the Bucyrus Works in Milwaukee, tearing at rock that drills had loosened. With 400,000 pounds of dynamite a month, the shovels cleared as many as 96 loaded railway cars an hour, and on a busy day, 160 trainloads rolled 12 miles to the dumps, a train passing almost every minute, and still the ground fought back, cut into the slope, and you expose iron-bearing rock to air and water. Let it oxidize, and the rock weakens. Weaken it under a wall that is now too steep, and the clay beneath turns to slow mud. Once it moves like a glacier, burying the shovels and the track, and filling the trench you spent a year emptying. Now the locks, 12 chambers, each 1,000 feet long and 110 feet wide. Walls of concrete up to 50 feet thick at the base, more than 4 million cubic yards of it, and not one pump. Ships weighing tens of thousands of tons are raised the full 85 feet and set down again by water running downhill from the lake. Then the component everything depends on, the gates. Each is a pair of steel leaves that swing shut and meet at a slight angle, pointing into the higher water. Each leaf is 65 feet wide, 7 feet thick, as much as 82 feet tall, and the heaviest weighs over 700 tons. They are hollow, built like the hull of a ship, so they half float and spare the hinges. They are not clamped shut, but held by the water itself. The higher the water on the upstream face, the harder the leaves press together. The thing sealing the canal against the weight of a lake is the weight of the lake, down to the seam where the two leaves meet. If the sill beneath was not laid level, a leaf would not seat. If it did not seat, the seal would not close. If the seal failed under 85 feet of pressure, the lake would find the gap and pour itself toward the sea. The whole crossing rests on a joint you could stand inside, and that joint was riveted steel. More than 6 million rivets driven by gangs on scaffolds slung over the chambers, most of them West Indian. That work was done overwhelmingly by hand. The record barely names. Drafting table covers the structures that got built, and the men the ledgers left out. And there is more of it every week, because who these men were is the part the celebrations left out. They came from the islands. Around 20,000 came from Barbados alone, close to 40% of the working-age men on that island, with thousands more from Jamaica, Martinique, and across the Caribbean. The administration sorted every worker onto one of two payrolls. Skilled men, almost all white and American, were paid in gold. The unskilled majority, almost all black and West Indian, were paid in silver, and the silver roll meant lower pay, worse housing, and separate everything. A segregation copied straight from the American South. A day in the cut was drilling, blasting, and hauling in wet heat under slopes that could give way without warning, and the tools they trusted their lives to have their own ways of killing. Trains ran men down, cranes swung into them, and the slides took them by the dozen. Of the 5,609 deaths recorded in the American decade, more than 4,000 were Caribbean workers. Their pay was about 10 cents an hour in silver. Whether that was fair is not a question the payroll can answer, because the payroll was written by the same administration that set the rate, and that is where the record thins to almost nothing. The gold roll men have names, titles, pensions, and photographs. The silver roll dead were often counted by nationality and by number, a line in a table, the men themselves unnamed. By the middle of 1913, the pieces came together. In May, the steam shovels working from opposite ends of the Culebra Cut met at the bottom, opening a continuous channel through the divide. The spillway at Gatun closed, the Chagres backed up into the lake, and all that remained was to run a ship through the whole system at once. That ship was the steamer Ancon, and on August 15, 1914, she made the first official transit. Up the 3 flights at Gatun, gate after gate, swinging shut behind her on water pressure alone, across the lake, into the cut-past slopes that had buried men for 7 years, down through Pedro Miguel and Miraflores. If one gate seal failed, if one slope let go, the crossing stopped. None did. About 9 hours after she entered the Atlantic, the Ancon came out into the Pacific. There was almost no one to cheer. 2 weeks earlier, the armies of Europe had gone to war, and the opening of the greatest engineering work of the age was buried on the inside pages. No fleet of nations, only canal staff, officials, and families on the banks. The men who built it were mostly gone, laid off the day the ditch was finished, and David Gaillard, who had spent 7 years fighting the Culebra Cut and finally beaten it, was not there. He had died of a brain tumor in December of 1913, 9 months before the first ship passed through his cut. The canal has already been outgrown once. The chambers sized for the biggest ships of 1914 could not hold the container ships of the next century, and in 2016, a wider set of locks opened beside the originals. The old locks still run, but the idea outlived the ships. Every lock canal that lifts a vessel over high ground instead of digging down to the water inherits the Panama principle. Move the water, not the mountain, and let gravity lift for free. Stand on the wall between 2 chambers today and watch it happen. A ship the length of 3 football fields slides in below you and stops. The gates swing closed behind it on their own buoyancy without a sound. A valve opens under your feet and the chamber fills, not pumped, just fed from a lake a few miles inland, and the ship rises past you as if the ocean were being handed up a step. To set that gate where you stand, a man on a swinging scaffold drives its rivets by hand in the heat for 10 cents an hour and may appear nowhere by name. When people picture the moment the world learned to move goods across the whole planet, this is the image: ships climbing a staircase of water through a jungle. The reason is not romance. It is that the thing worked exactly as designed on the first day and every day since. These were the men who cut the divide and hung the gates, their names mostly lost to a segregated ledger, and the work still deserves recognition a century on. It was never a ditch scraped between 2 seas, and it was never a shortcut through Panama. It is a staircase of water that lifts the ocean over a mountain, built by men the record forgot.